Hey, it's Merce. Welcome back to my channel where I review horror books with a supernatural focus. In today's video, I'm going to share with you my top reads for 2023. Now, 2023 was not my best year of reading. It was really hard for me to focus and concentrate when I had so many personal things in my life going on, but these things happen, and I was just really happy to have read as much as I did. I did read some books that were giving me so much comfort that they really made me feel better. Like they just were like a big hug in some weird way. And I think the thing with horror is like, I think most people think like,
ooh, horror, it's so depressing. Why would you want to read that when you are depressed?
But to me, it's really comforting that something so scary in these people's lives are happening that they find out why it's happening. There's a reason for what's going on, and they're able to do something about it, figure it out, or something. And that's really all I wanted for my own life, to solve these scary problems that I have. So in some weird way, it just kind of gave me some hope. Now, the criteria for what is my best read for this year was a book that stuck with me through the year. Something that I was thinking about constantly, something that really got under my skin or gave me a lot of food for thought, or was just so captivating that while reading the book, I was entranced. Well, the holidays are sort of over. I mean, we have New Year's coming up, and that's really what I'm excited about. I'm hoping that New Year's happens and it just feels different. But how was your year this year for reading? Did you read more than you expected or less? Was there any real reason why it was more or less? Do you have a goal for 2024 in terms of what you're gonna read? Let us know down in the comments. And if you like this video, please be sure to hit that like button. And if you would like to get more videos about horror books and sometimes occasionally a comic book or a thriller in there from time to time, please hit that subscribe button. All of these reads are at least a 4.5 to a 5-star read. They're not going to be in any real particular order because I really don't want to compare them to each other because they're just awesome in their own ways and I love them. That's basically it. I love them. One of the things I really took advantage of this year was the audiobook. And the audiobook was great because when I didn't have the energy to read, I could just listen and, kind of do something else, lay around on the couch, lay around in the bed, maybe do some chores or whatever. So I really took advantage of that and allowed me to really not super fail on my reading for this year, which was great. But I listened to a lot of great audiobooks. So we're going to start off with those just because why not? So the first audiobook that I want to talk about is Anaya Alburn's If You See Her. I really liked this a lot. It took a while to kind of get where it was going, but the way that it was building was really cool because you could feel the tension. You could feel that something was coming just kind of from the beginning. It was just had this really neat vibe to it. And the story is about 4 friends from high school who had lost one of their friends during a time when they were breaking into abandoned houses. And in this instance, their friend had an accident and died in one of these houses. So years later, they're all still really coping with this, but then they decide to go back to the house. And of course, things kind of get a bit wild. There was a quality to this that just really spoke to me because I'm from a small town and I just recognized these characters and I knew them, like they were aspects of people that I used to know. So I feel like that environment was really nailed really well. And also this weird situation that's happening with this abandoned house and between the relationships with the characters and their significant others and families were just very real, very good. So it was very convincing. Like everything that was happening was just very convincing. I was buying it hook, line, and sinker. And I just loved the conversations between the characters, especially between the main character and his wife, where she was just like, what is going on with you? Because he's getting caught up in the past about their friend and everything. And it was a very realistic, like, conversation you might have with a significant other. It was such a good story, and I just enjoyed all of the details and the aspects about it that I listened to it more than once. And I don't really do that too often with audiobooks. I mean, really has its claws in me, where I just want to live in that space again. I want to visit these people again. So I thought this was a really good example of a quiet ghost story that was pretty chilling, entertaining, and unforgettable, at least for me. The next one I listened to was episode 13 by Craig DeLuey. And I had no idea that when I was going to download this and listen to it, that it wasn't just an audiobook, it was more of a dramatic performance. It had different actors and had some music and sound effects. It was really cool. So this was about a paranormal team who goes to this building that was supposed to have been owned by some kind of cultist, like some kind of spiritualist or esoteric, playing around with stuff they shouldn't be. And, they're going there to see if it's real and, what's there. And are there any, vibrations like still hanging out there? Is it haunted, basically? And so they have a really interesting team of like scientists and technicians and stuff. So everybody has their strengths. And they also have a podcast that they do. So it kind of has this feeling of like taking your favorite reality paranormal show and having it go in a direction that you always wanted to go, but it can't. Because if it did, it would be so fake. But, you still would love it if it actually went there. Like if they actually found evidence of ghosts and all these different things and it was completely wild. But this episode 13 book, it goes there and it goes further. It goes past that because towards the end of the book, it starts sort of demonstrating what a ghost is and why they're here and things like that. And it's very interesting. It's very food for thought. It's something that I was thinking about for a while. And just that particular part of the book, I listened to it a couple of times. I just really wanted to fully absorb like what they were saying because it's something that I never really heard before in books specifically about haunted houses or ghosts and hauntings and stuff like that. So it was really engaging, but it was also really entertaining because of the performances. This would be so good for a long road trip that you have to do. The next one is The Haunting of Ella Hunter by V. Castro. This story is about a woman who has been seeing this very terrifying image of another woman in her house. And it's something that she's kind of like keeping to herself, but she sees it pretty often. It's very disturbing. She doesn't understand who this woman is. This woman is a housewife. She's not really happy in her marriage. She feels very disconnected from her culture. She just doesn't really have any real agency or autonomy. She just doesn't know who she is, kind of. So she goes on this journey to sort of reconnect with her culture and to find out, what this woman vision is. And so she does that, and it's wild. It's gory, it's creepy, it's eerie, and it also time travels a little bit. So we're going back in time to the time of the conquistadors. We're going back in time way before that. And it's all kind of swinging back around to the La Llorona myth. So it's really fabulous. I don't think that you'll be able to predict like anything that's going to happen. So you're just going to have to be along for the ride. And it's very cool. The last audiobook is going to be a surprise for a lot of people because, as you know, I'm not a big vampire fan. I love Bram Stoker's Dracula, the movie, but I didn't love the book so much, okay? Like, I'll admit that. Vampires to me are just, take them or leave them, and I'd rather just leave them most of the time. But so many people have been telling me to read Anne Rice for decades, like, you need to read Anne Rice. And I'd always be like, nah, vampires. But I decided that, you know what? There's a new year coming, and it's going to be a new me. Let's try out a vampire book by the queen herself, Anne Rice, because I gotta check it out, right? I gotta do it. I listened to Interview with a Vampire, I wanted to read that one specifically because I was sort of familiar with the story from the movie, which I actually really love. I like vampires on film, but whatever, let's not talk about it. The writing was so heart-wrenching, so vulnerable. Earlier this December, I was really just at the bottom. And for some reason, though, this story with, this vampire Lewis, he sort of hates himself. He loathes what he is. And, he's kind of surrounded by these like insane sociopaths like Lestat. And to some degree, Claudia is nuts, like nuts. But he's just trying to cling on to like this last bit of humanity that he has. And even though he understands these like machinations of Claudia and Lestat and, other vampires and things like that, he still doesn't have a lot of room to maneuver. This is a book that made me feel less alone. And I know it's gonna sound really weird because I'm not a vampire, and obviously like my problems in like the spectrum of the world are pretty small, but I think that I do suffer a lot with feeling alone and being lonely and feeling as if there's no way out, and that whatever I am, with all of my failures and all of my, issues and problems, it just feels like I don't know how to deal with those sometimes. And so Lewis is kind of speaking about feelings like these, and it was amazing. This woman, she can write because her ability to reach so far into like the human psyche, like the human, I don't know, the human soul, and to reveal these characters in a way that's not expository. Expositionary? I think you know what I mean. It was beautiful. These lines that she was writing, these characters, the imagery of the settings, and I was in love. I'm totally in love with Anne Rice. Now the next test would be though is to like read one of her books about witches, because I'm not a big witch fan either. I know that people think that's crazy. Like I just feel like sometimes it's just kind of cheesy and it doesn't really speak to me. But if anyone can probably change my opinion, it might be Anne Rice. So we'll see. But that audiobook was really special too, because the narrator, he sounded exactly like Louis from Vampire Interview with the Vampire film. The same cadence, maybe sing-song quality in the voice a little bit. It's like this very fluid way of speaking. It's just like Brad Pitt's character. But it was such a pleasure to listen to. It was gorgeous. So anyway, that audiobook really gave me a hug on the inside that I needed. So now on to my physical books. I did read Penny Dreadful. This is volume 2, The Beauteous Evil. This is a graphic novel of the series. It's a continuation of the series, and I have the complete collection, which I think is just 3, unfortunately. But I just read this one, and this whole series in itself is great. But this was so good. It's just like the show, but it's a little bit more nuts because they can just kind of do whatever they want, and it's intense. But all of the characters keep their personality and they look like the characters as well. The story is just full of blood and death and gore, and it's awesome. So the next thing I read was The Worm and His Kings by Haley Piper. Now, I'm not a big cosmic horror fan, but this is a cosmic horror story that, I guess I haven't read a lot of them, so I can't say that it's different from the other ones, but this one was really interesting to me because it has a really big picture kind of epicness at the end. And it also takes place in New York City. It's taking place in the 90s. And there's this whole entire thing with something being in the tunnels. And if you've ever lived in New York or heard about it, people live down there.
New York, New York.
But it's a great setting. And the cosmic aspect of this, I thought was so cool. It was just really creepy and fun to run into them in these tunnels. And like I said, by the end, it becomes this epic thing. It's sort of like the universe expanding a little bit. I can't tell you much because I don't want to ruin it, but it just becomes like a really big thing. The characters in here are very touching, and this is just a really great story that if you aren't into cosmic horror so much, maybe try this, because for me, I was thinking about this for weeks was so good. Now this next one I haven't reviewed yet. I have a bunch of books that I need to review, but I picked this up a while ago. This was one of my used books. I usually always buy my books used if I can. And this is The Whispering by Sarah Rain. And actually this is a historical haunted house, but with a twist. So it's not just supernatural, it's also a little something else in there. This story takes place in 2010, but its kind of obsession is with World War I. And our main character is this English professor who's looking to do some academic work about a specific convent in Belgium. So he heads to this place called the Fosse House. It's somewhere in England. And he is staying there because the woman who owns it, she's a relative of someone who was in the choir at the convent. So he's hoping that she's going to have a bunch of documents that he can look through and get some information. But while he's there, he finds this drawing, and it's a drawing of these World War I soldiers. And the drawing is implicating that this drawing was done here at the Fosse House. So he starts to get really involved with like figuring out what this drawing is about. And meanwhile, this house is haunted. And it was haunted the first moment he walked up the driveway. He sees a guy who's in this kind of old war outfit, and he's saying something like, "Don't make me go back there. I'll go mad." And he's like, "Okay, I won't make you go back there." And then he just kind of ignores it, thinking that, maybe it's like a nephew of the woman or something like who lives there. So he goes back and, he doesn't mention it though, because she's kind of weird. But as time kind of goes by, he realized like that wasn't a person. And so a series of events start to happen, and it gets really interesting because there's all of this supernatural activity. We go back in time to World War I to certain events, I guess we could say. And we're kind of doing that through diaries and letters, emails, any type of documents. There's a lot of things to read here like that. And usually I don't really enjoy that. I don't like reading like really long letters. Like I don't like it because I think it makes me feel like, am I gonna notice the thing I'm supposed to notice? Like, I don't know, I think I get anxious about it. But anyway, these were such a pleasure to read because it wasn't telling you anything that was superfluous, for instance. So that's kind of like the theme for the whole book though, is that it does not drag you down with a lot of information, but it is giving you a lot of information, which was nice. Also, I really love the main character because this guy was like, he would let his imagination run. And so he would already be getting caught up in like all of these theories and like whatever is going on in the house and stuff. And he was always like trying to sort of temper himself. But it was kind of nice to just see a character like allow themselves to explore ideas and not just be shut down until something like so crazy happened and then they believed. It was actually nice to see a character like that. My only complaint about this book though was like the main character, he has a girlfriend and she was so boring and so dull that it was very in contrast to the rest of the book because everything else was so interesting. But that was my only complaint, but I thought it was a surprising read. So historical, supernatural, but with a twist. Another author that I fell in love with this year, Christina Henry, Alice, was so good. Sometimes I don't like the mix of fantasy and horror because sometimes I just feel like it's normally 90% fantasy and like 10% horror. But this is not the case for this one. This is like 90% horror and 10% fantasy, which is exactly how I like it. But this was such a good, dark, creepy, messed up take on Dark Alice, which is one of my favorite things in the world is Dark Alice. So the book is tough. It's like brutal, it's intense, it's a lot of Alice dealing with her sexual assaults, and I wouldn't say seeking revenge, but I'd say maybe like facilitating outcomes that we're already going to probably be heading to some of these characters. The book feels very much like Alice in the Alice in Wonderland universe, but it doesn't take the easy way out. Like it's not using curiouser and curiouser as dialogue and things like that, like things that are just so like overused and played out and boring basically. Like what does it mean anymore? I don't know. But Henry took Alice and made her unique, but still recognizable as Alice. There's also a really incredible sequence of events in here which have to do with a rabbit. And it's a very minor character. But this rabbit, he's in a situation where it's not a good one. So the way it resolves is very satisfying. And I was so happy and just really just exuberant, actually, because I think as the reader, I really needed what was coming. Like, I needed it to feel good and to be able to move on. It was I don't know, it was a small thing, but it was really good. The writing style, it's kind of like this clean writing style. It's not relying on flowery descriptions. It has that really good mix of playfulness and darkness. It's not trying to show you that it can write. It's just really telling us a good story nicely and cleanly. It's great. Silver Nitrate by Silvia Moreno Garcia was another unexpected great read for me. I love like old Hollywood, so I kind of always get kind of excited to read about old Hollywood. And in this instance, we talk about old Hollywood in Mexico during the 1950s, and that comes up a lot. And it was just really cool. And one of the best characters in this book to me was Abel Ureta, he was a filmmaker, a horror filmmaker in the 1950s and 60s. And this book, I think, takes place in the 90s. So he's in his 80s, I think, by now. And he sort of still kind of lives his lifestyle in the sense of like his apartment pretty much looks the part of like a 1960s filmmaker. He has like a tray of like, you know, drinks to make you from and all that kind of stuff. Everything that you imagine a director probably is like, that's what he's like. So he's completely charming and endearing, but he's sort of the catalyst, you know, for all their problems, which is for Tristan and Montserrat. And Tristan and Montserrat are like best friends. Their relationship is a bit complicated because, you know, one kind of caters more, you know, than the other one ever will. So it's a weird lopsided relationship that's sort of borderlines on kind of toxic at times. But anyway, they are both in the film industry, and Abel is like one of her favorite old-time directors, and Tristan is able to get them together and have a little soiree at his apartment. And this is when the trouble begins, when Abel says, I want to finish one of my movies that never got finished. Will you help me do it? And they were like, yeah, of course we will. But this film, of course, is not just a film. It's something much more darker and scarier and creepier than that. And they get all wrapped up in it and things go to hell. I binged this. I was completely immersed in the story. The only thing I didn't like about the book were the main characters. Like, I felt like they were okay. Like, it wasn't like I couldn't read it or something. They are constantly put in this position to make you think, will they, won't they, constantly, all the time. And it was just so distracting to me because I was like, this character Montserrat and this character Tristan, they are so different, and that pushing them together, it doesn't make any sense. Like, I just don't see it happening. But that was like the only thing that I just was like, whatever, I don't like that. That's kind of, you know, weird to me. But regardless, that's just like a personal preference, I guess. The story was, it was good. It was creepy and weird. I couldn't wait to figure out what was going on with that film. That was why I was racing. I was like, what is it with this film? What's going on with this film? Like, I could not hold back. So a lot of the times when I read books that have haunted objects in them, I mean, sometimes it's like so basic, right? Like, for instance, if it's like a ring and then you put it on and now you're haunted or whatever, or I don't know, just something that's like very obvious, like an obvious thing that you would do. But in this book, the way the film is cursed is pretty unique, and it's different, and it's a little more complicated, and there's some more things going on. I thought it was very clever, and I was really impressed with that. The last thing on my list for my best of 2023 is the Macabre collection by David Haynes. I have read this collection twice now. I reread it maybe 4 weeks ago, and this has a insanely wonderful comfort for me, similar to Interview with a Vampire. They both share this kind of macabre sense, but that's pretty much all they share. These stories are not about vampires. It's about vulnerable people in London in the late 1800s in this setting of soot and dirtiness and dankness and crime and murder and just an all-around kind of casualness with human life. So all of these stories are taking place in the same little area. There is a thread that connects all of the stories, and the variety here is really good. Like, it kind of has that, like, I made a deal with the devil type thing, but it's not a devil. I mean, I guess I don't really know what it was. It's like someone who's sticking their like little cloven hooves in certain people's lives, right? And so it's really fascinating because you have people who are just trying to survive, trying to make a decent decision, and then finding themselves in very bloody situations. And because it has this wonderful setting of the Victorian era, I love that era because it was just so scary. It's so scary to me. It is so scary. Like, everything in the Victorian era was gonna kill you. Everything. Your stove could blow up. You could get sick from your wallpaper. You could be killed because a doctor needs a corpse to operate on. I mean, it's up there, okay? The way that it's written too, it sort of reads like a Penny Dreadful, but in the way that I want the Penny Dreadful to be, okay? I've read Penny Dreadfuls and they're fun, but they're dry to me. It's not always fun to read, okay? For me, at least. It has that Victorian flavor, but it doesn't have that dowdiness of dryness. One of my favorite stories from in this short story collection is about this boy who his whole entire family died of something, like some kind of influenza or something, and he was the only one left. And he was trying to protect their bones. He didn't want them to be thrown into some unmarked grave because that's what they would do. But of course, when the grave dude comes and he's like, all right, I gotta shovel in all these bones from all these people into a hole. This kid like loses it. He's just like, no, you're not gonna take my parents' bones. And he's just like, bonk, and he just bonks him on the head. So this little kid actually ends up learning a lot from this grave digger, this grave digger dude. And so he takes care of the graveyard, and at some point somebody comes along and puts their little hooves in his life, you know. And the stories are so dark and bleak and brutal. I think with a good Victorian story, it needs to be bleak, like bleeding bleak. Like, it needs to be bleak. And all of these stories are super bleak. There are no happy endings. Sorry to spoil it for you, but it is so gothic. It is so macabre. It's good. I will read these stories when I feel low, you know, when I need a little pick me up. So those were my top reads for the year. I tried to keep it short. I hope I did. I hope you guys found a book here you might want to pick up. I would, suggest it. I liked them. I hope next year I'll be able to read more. I'm hoping that things turn around, and because, everyone needs money. Everyone needs security. Everybody needs insurance. I would like to get some glasses because I need some glasses. Have a health checkup. All those luxuries. Anyway, I'm a hot mess, but you're not, and you should be really happy about that. And I'm happy for you. And I hope that next year is going to be amazing for you, for me, for everyone. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me tonight. I really do appreciate it. Other than that, please take care of yourselves, look out for each other, and we'll talk to you next time.